make sure a little housekeeping. If you would, if you have a question, put it in the chat. All right, put it in the chat, the questions that you have, and we'll make sure if we're able to get to those questions. We'll respond to as many as possible that are not covered in the forum. And we also ask that you remain muted until you're recognized to speak so that everything will flow as smoothly and seamlessly as possible. So again, welcome, and let's get it on.
Good evening. Grace, mercy, and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Let us pray. Almighty God, we give you thanks for bringing us to this moment in the day. We thank you for bringing us through the day, through dangers seen and unseen. We ask, God, that you will indeed bind us together in a common union by your Spirit over these virtual connections, and that you would indeed help us to love you by loving those who have such great needs as we will discuss tonight. Help us to love you, Lord, not only in word, but in deeds and in truth, to uplift those who are in the greatest need in this community. Bind us together with common union and common purpose. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good evening, everyone. I am the Dr. Lamont Freeman Foster, Executive Director of St. John Community Development Corporation. And on behalf of my board of directors, we greet you with peace and happiness. I want to thank the panelists, the distinguished board of panelists, for accepting the invitation to come and share with us. I want to especially give special recognition to Dr. Carol White and to Ms. Vitas Neal for taking on my vision and putting it into action. Let me just give you a quick summary or overview of how all this came about. Upon my introduction to the Wilson community, I met some outstanding politicians, some caring politicians, some wonderful educators. And so I began to think that if we demystify the misinformation and get to the heart of the matter, then we can approach systemic change in a reasonable and transformative way. But first of all, before we can look at systemic change, we have to have the truth. And again, after speaking with Dr. Wilson and her sharing her vision about education and speaking with Mayor Stevens and others, I began to think, what can we do to change the infrastructure systemically? And so I applied for a grant at the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation and shared my vision on how systemic change can actually happen and what will be needed to make it happen. And the first icon would be ridding ourselves of misinformation. And what has seemed to happen is that a lot of these agencies and various nonprofits and profits and government agencies are doing fantastic work, but they have fallen into the category of not being trustworthy, and that's not always the case. And so first thing that we need to do is to get to the truth and answer and present those penetrating questions that will get to the heart of the truth, where transparency is not just a thought, but a reality. And so I shared my thought and vision with Dr. Carol White and with Sister Vitas and Neal, and told them what I wanted. And this is the product of the fruits of their labor. So I want you all to know that there will be a series of forums dealing with social ills and social reform. My task from the grant is to also to establish a center for systemic change. And so I will take the funds that the funder, Z. Smith Rental Foundation, has provided, and make sure that I do exactly that so that this type of forum can continue. So without further ado, I will stop there and allow us to hear from our panelists. Thank you, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to introduce you to our panelists this evening.
Venus, you're muted. You need to unmute.
I will start over. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to introduce you to our panelists this evening who have taken time out of their very busy schedules to accommodate us this evening. We're very fortunate to have experts in their fields to respond to the voices of our citizens. Responding to our questions on and concerns on education will be Dr. Cheryl Wilson, who is the Associate Superintendent of Wilson County Schools. Responding to our questions and concerns about food insecurity will be Mr. Larry Morris. He is from the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina, and he serves in the capacity of the Director of Partner Services. And in housing, we have two presenters, Mr. Timothy Rogers, Wilson Housing Authority Director of Public Relations, and Mr. Adrian Dixon from the Self-Help Credit Union. I want to thank you again, and we will proceed with the evening. Dr. White. We will now have Dr. Cheryl Wilson to begin the program.
Good evening to all. I would like to first thank Dr. Wilson for agreeing to represent Wilson County Schools tonight. Dr. Wilson is the Associate Superintendent, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I have your title right, for Curriculum and Instruction. So good evening, Dr. Wilson. We would like to know, first of all, we understand that the Black male suspension rates are high in Wilson as well as across the state. Would you talk to us a little bit about why that is so and how some of the strategies that Wilson County is using to help us to alter that?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. And I look forward to sharing with you about some of the great things that we're doing in Wilson County Schools to help with the issues that are going on. The suspension rates are, as you said, Dr. White, high regarding African-American males. And that's not just the case in Wilson County, but that is the case across the state, across the nation. We have looked at the district and at the school level at what those reasons can be. There are certainly some of our students that we have to follow the policy with. We have what we call reportables that we are required to provide any kind of suspension to it, long-term suspension, out-of-school suspension, in-school suspension. And we have to follow that district policy. We also know that we have some training that we need to do with our staff. Our principals and our teachers always look towards what are some of the best ways that we can handle whatever comes their way when it's not some of those that are in that reportable section, such as just sitting down and talking with our students. I think that is extremely important, finding out what their needs are. We also have looked at where those issues are occurring. When we disaggregate the data, we have found that some of those issues are occurring in some of the less structured times, such as in transitions, or outside on the playground, or in the bus or in the cafeteria. So those are some of the things that we have, or places and situations where we've looked to make sure that that we have supervision in place, we have training in place for our staff.
Dr. Wilson, do they have restorative justice in Wilson County School?
We do have some schools that are participating in that. We have been working on that over this past year. Actually, as Dr. Foster talked about a grant, then we work with those grant funds as well. And we have a trainer that has come in prior to COVID and has been throughout this year. I've actually participated in some of the restorative justice training. It's been a little challenging with COVID, but it has been very helpful for our staff. And we've worked with the support staff at the school as well as the administrators in that professional development over the past year.
And would you explain to our audience just a little about what restorative justice is?
Well, it's another way, again, I think that, like I said in that first question, is sitting down and talking with our students, finding out information about them, not just jumping to the conclusion that the consequence that the student or the behavior that the student is exhibiting is because of coming from some kind of place of malice or not wanting to behave. It's coming from a place that that our students might need some redirection rather than the suspensions. Just like the term restorative, to restore them back into the classroom, to restore their dignity, to not come across that this is their behavior is simply because of that they want to be in a misbehaving situation.
The other concern that the community had, of course, with COVID is the learning gaps and the technology gaps that are occurring as a result of students being online, doing distance learning versus being in face-to-face environments for quite some time. So one of the questions they had was, how has the district addressed the technology gap to ensure equal access to learning opportunities?
We are very fortunate in Wilson County as a whole district about the partnership that we have with Greenlight. So I think that that is huge. Not all counties offer that kind of broadband across such a wide area. But even with Greenlight, there are places in Wilson County that does not have that broadband access. I have read in the newspaper that there's talk about extending that to other towns in Wilson County, and that would be great. We know in Wilson County schools that there are students who need to have access that wouldn't be able to have the Greenlight just because of their locations. So we have provided hotspots free of charge to our families, and for lots of our students. Matter of fact, we've had some even as late as a week ago that were picking up those hotspots. Dr. White has reached out to us as well, and she and her committee have paid for those families that might have need for the Greenlight reduced rate. So that's been very helpful. We've expanded our access outside of the school buildings. So if families wanted to come to the school and be in that area on campus, then that's fine too, prior to them being able to enter back into the school. We have supplied paper packets. Now, that's not necessarily the most exciting, but we do have some families that did not want their students working online using a computer or a Chromebook. So we have made sure that we provided that option for them. And we've also provided the technology support during and after school hours. That's been extremely important for our families, because just handing them a device and they not knowing how to use it, or if it's not working, then how could they get some help? We've benchmarked with other districts, and we've collaborated with many of the community partners. I think that's been huge in Wilson County, so that we can be at the forefront of moving forward in this technology gap.
That's great. And I do want to point out that several things that Dr. Wilson said, I have repeated often in the community as a plus for Wilson, and that is having green light. And the other plus has been that we have a superintendent that was technology minded prior to COVID and used quite a bit of funding to ensure that there was one-on-one computer access at the majority of the schools. So that was a huge help when it came to moving students online. We were not as far behind as many other counties. So thank you for that. One of the other questions is, what assessments are being used to identify learning disparities? We know that during COVID, we have pockets of children that are exceptional students that have special plans in place. We have students that are second language students. We have students that, under Read to Achieve, they needed to increase their learning rate. So we have these different populations of students with varied needs. So what kinds of assessments are being used to help with those learning disparities?
Well, we have our benchmarks that we use at the district level, but we also have at the school level our teachers with the formative assessments. We had a conversation this week about our social and emotional learning, what kind of assessment that we could use to help determine where our students are in that area. But I also think that the instruction is equally important. We've been very diligent in making sure that the instruction that our students are receiving, whether they are face-to-face or whether they're in a virtual or even in the hybrid, because now that we're back in school and under Plan A, many of our teachers are teaching the face-to-face students as well as the online or the virtual, that hybrid. So the quality of instruction is extremely important to us, to where students that are online get the same level as the students who are in the face-to-face. We do have our summer learning opportunity that we're in the midst of planning for. We've been meeting, I would have to say, definitely every day for several hours since House Bill 82 passed. Prior to that, we were actually meeting to have some kind of summer learning opportunity. But in House Bill 82, it really opened up the door to all of our grade levels. I saw some chats coming in, but I didn't see them as I was talking.
Right, we have someone that's monitoring the chat.
Okay.
They are recording the questions, and what they'll do at the end is to address any that you have not already responded to some way in the conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know that the state of North Carolina is still requiring that schools do high stakes testing. And they were, there was some conversation, and Representative Cooper Suggs can probably address a little of that if she wants. But so what happened is, the question that was asked was, what's going to happen to students when they re-enter under the re-entry plan? And I know you posted the re-entry plan online. So what's going to happen in the re-entry plan, or in the re-entering of students, if they are already behind? So they're moving from 5th grade to 6th grade, to 8th grade to 9th grade, in transition years. There's so many different populations that you have to consider now. Then you have students that have been socially isolated, that, especially if they are young children coming to school maybe for the first time, and those who are returning after only being in kindergarten, going to 1st grade. So how is that going to be monitored? What supports are going to be in place to help those students with their emotional behavior needs at the elementary level?
Well, we have lots of supports that are happening. The ESSER money that we're getting, we've received the ESSER 1 money. We've applied for the ESSER 2 and we'll be receiving that in the near future. And then we have the application where we're asking for the input for our community on the ESSER 3. And we have individuals, part of that funding provides an executive director of student services. We're looking forward to Dr. Kendra King coming on board in, I think it's May 17th. And in underneath her area for student services will be some of the things that you mentioned and providing those wraparound supports for our students. Now that's a new position for Wilson County Schools, but we've had those supports before in several different areas within the district. But we felt the need to put this under one house and to have one direction where our counselors and our nurses and our social workers are all there so that that support that, like you described, that will be needed will be aligned, will be not misguided and not not directed.
And I'll ask one additional question before we transition, and that is, in the funding that has been provided, was there monies available to have additional nurses and psychologists, students that may need help in those areas? I know that the school district has, if I'm not mistaken, there's two clinics in the schools now. But you know, we often hear that there's a need for more on-site nurses as well. Was there any funding provided for that?
Well, we will have 3 of those clinics in the partnership with Wilson County Health Department. We're getting ready to have our ribbon cutting at the Hunt Wash Clinic actually next week. So we encourage everyone who would like to come to that. That would be great. We did not include the nurses and the psychologist as per se for one for every school in the budget. That's something, again, that we would like the input from the community. If you would like to have that, then please share that into the survey so that we can develop the plan. We do have one of the psychologists included, and that would be a psychologist that is focused primarily on social and emotional learning. And that person would report to our new executive director for student services, because we do realize that that's an area where we need support. I do think that it's worthy to talk about. We have a great program that we're already working with our social workers, and we have contracted social workers outside of school hours. And we're calling that Project Reach, the capital REACH. And Dr. Wanda Dawson is spearheading that project and working with those students who might be considered missing in action or who might be at risk. We've gotten names from each of the schools, and we have our social workers and our psychologists and our counselors and our administrators trying to locate those students during the school day. But some families are working and they may not be able to answer the phone. They may not have email. So what we've done is contracted with them to reach out to families after hours and as well as on the weekends. And that has been a huge success. And we're going to continue that as a part of this ESSER funding.
Well, Dr. Wilson, we want to thank you very much, and I hope that you can stay with us to the end. There are a couple of questions in the chat that perhaps we can get to at that time. But thank you
Sure.
so much for being here with us. We're going to transition now into our next area. And I do believe that next we have an ad. Is that correct? Yes, we have a community ad. Thank you.
What a pleasure to join you tonight. I'm Paula Benson, the Executive Director of Wilson Forward, an organization building partnerships to move our community forward. Our vision is to provide a place that supports a high quality of life for all. And the voices from you, our community members, represent one of the greatest resources to realize that vision. High quality education for our children and meaningful employment after graduation are essential for all of us. We are working in partnership to understand barriers some of our community members face to attain that education, as well as the skills they need for jobs that will support their families. Over the past few years, the Wilson community has made so many accomplishments through partnerships. We have established health centers in 3 of our local schools to give all children in those schools access to the health care they need. Mentors have been connected with some of our most at-risk students. And perhaps one of the most exciting opportunities in Wilson's future will be the YMCA after-school middle school program that will offer students programs in sports, the arts, and career exploration. The past year has been really hard for all of us. And as we work with our local government, our schools, our businesses, our nonprofits, and our faith community, we know there is work to do immediately ahead. Lived experience is valuable expertise. Ultimately, we want to make changes that are wanted and needed. We need your partnership, your voice, and your guidance. Please consider connecting with our work by simply searching the web for Wilson Forward, and we look forward to hearing from you.
We will now hear from Mr. Larry Morris with Food Insecurity. Mr. Morris, over the past year, we know that food insecurity in Wilson County has reached much, much higher levels. Of course, we know it's because of COVID. So we would like to know, the citizens would like to know, why is Wilson labeled a food desert? And how is this need being addressed?
Before I answer that question, can I just give a little background about the food bank? I don't want to assume everybody knows what the food bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina does.
Thank you.
Yes, so we've been around for about 41 years now. We were founded in 1980. Our food bank serves about 900 partner agencies in a 34 county service territory. Those partner agencies range from food pantries to emergency soup kitchens, emergency shelters, after-school programs, daycare centers, group homes, et cetera. So just a whole gamut of different types of agencies that utilize our services. And we provide food and non-food essentials to those organizations. And in North Carolina currently, there's about 756,000 people who are at risk of hunger. That number's gone up significantly because of COVID. It was about 560,000 before that. And then about 253,000 of those are children, and 165,000 are elderly people who are at risk of hunger in our service territory. Last fiscal year, we distributed about 92 million pounds of food through that partner agency network that I just told you about. And that equals to be about 76 million meals that our partner agencies are able to distribute into each one of the communities. Meals could be in the form of food boxes, produce distributions, truck deliveries, or it could be actual meals that are served from our soup kitchens, group homes, et cetera. So Wilson is considered to be a food desert, at least I know the eastern part of the city. I'm not from Wilson, so I'm not going to sit here and try to tell Wilson County, or Wilson City folks how to do their business. But I did talk to some of our partner agencies yesterday to kind of get the scoop on what's going on in Wilson. I've been to Wilson many times, visiting with the partner agencies over the years. I've been in the food bank now for about 27 years. So I am familiar with the city. But these folks let me know that there's only a couple of grocery stores on the east side of the city. And in food insecurity, I guess the academic definition of it basically is that, it's a geographic area where residents don't really have access to nutritious food, especially fruits and vegetables. It's hard for them to get to those food sources like grocery stores. And you're looking at maybe like the definition is that if 33% of the population lives 1 mile away in an urban area, that's considered to be a food desert. Or if it's in a rural area, like within 10 miles. And according to what I was talking about with folks yesterday, Wilson will qualify as a food desert. What are we doing about that? As a food bank, we work with a network of partner agencies throughout our service territory. And in Wilson in particular, we have about 15 agencies that do food distribution. They're not the end all and be all by any means. That's really almost like a Band-Aid, really, to help people kind of get by. But those agencies, we have about 13 food pantries that are emergency in nature. Those food pantries could be just traditional pantries that have regular office hours where folks can actually come in and receive food from them. They also could be what we call a mobile food pantry, where we actually deliver food out to those sites. And people maybe line up in cars and receive boxes of fresh produce, bread and bakery items, et cetera. So those are some of the things the food bank is doing currently to help out.
The next question, Mr. Mars, how are food locations being advertised for the community? Because we know that there are people in rural areas who may not have access to a lot of media. And how is that being satisfied by those individuals?
A lot of times our partner agencies will work with groups like the Department of Social Services. They might get their information out through the health departments. A lot of times word of mouth. Word of mouth spreads really quickly in communities. And the food bank itself has a website, and foodbankcenc.org. And we have a food finder app on that website. So people have, most people nowadays seem to have smartphones. So if they Google, food assistance or food pantry in their area, the food bank will come up usually, and they can type in the zip code and then and the radius if they want to search in, and they can find the local food resources that are in their particular area.
When you said they get it by word of mouth?
Yes, ma'am. A lot of times when we visit with our partner agencies, we have to visit our agencies at least once every 20 months. We're part of the Feed America National Food Bank Network, and they require us to visit. And it's a good thing for us to get to know our partners anyway. So even if it wasn't required, we'd go out and visit them and get to know what their needs are, what their challenges are, et cetera. And when we speak with our partner agency representatives, we ask them, how do they get the word out about their services? And again, many of them do utilize the Department of Social Services and other organizations. But the main means a lot of time is by word of mouth. So folks who have gone to the food pantry that know about the services that are provided, they'll tell their friends, they'll tell their neighbors, they'll tell their relatives about the pantry services, especially if the pantries are doing a really good job in serving people with respect and dignity. The word is going to spread into the community by the folks receiving those services.
Is there any kind of a directory that is set up just to share information with the communities about where they can access food?
Yeah, as I mentioned, on the food bank's website, we do have that directory. So people would just go to the website and they would search by the zip code. And when you on the website, punch in the zip code, put in the mile radius you want to search by, and all the agencies that are in that vicinity will show up. It'll have the name of the agency, the hours of operation, what type of program they are, with the food pantry, soup kitchen, the shelter type program. And then there's other, there's like food pantry networks that people can Google as well that are outside the food bank scope, but there are directories that are online that again are outside the food bank's purview. The most important thing though for folks when they are accessing these directories is to call the agencies that are on them to make sure they're still open, they're still in existence. And with COVID, a lot of our partner agencies had to shut down temporarily, and some of them are coming back online at the moment. But they were just trying to be as safe as possible because a lot of the folks were at risk of contracting COVID because a lot of the volunteers are elderly, which is one of the high-risk groups for COVID. So it's always a good idea for people to call the agency in advance to make sure they're still up, running, available, have food available, et cetera.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morris. And as Dr. White said earlier, we would love for you to stick around. You've shared some valuable information with us. And I did see a few questions in the chat, but I want to move on to the next presenter so that we can have time to ask more questions. So thank you so very much.
Sure.
Okay, we're
We'll
going to
move.
play our second community ad.
One of the 5 strategies that the SPOT does to serve kids and families in Wilson is to end childhood hunger. During March 16th in the pandemic, the SPOT served over 235,000 meals. Today, we are in remote learning and after school. Our remote learners get hot breakfast and lunch, and our after school kids get a full meal sponsored by the Summer Food Service Program and Child Adult Food Care Program. We also need to teach our kids STEM programming and how to grow their own food. This is grown in our hydroponic garden system located down at the Natural Play Space. In here it's spinach, leaf lettuce, romaine. So, how would you like a hot supper today? Hello, my name is Matt Edwards, and I'm the CEO of the SPOT here in Wilson. Academics are very important to us, and
So
when
on
the
today's
schools were
episode, I'm joined
interrupted
by
due
Cody
to the
Butler.
pandemic,
Cody is a teen life coach.
we flew into action and opened a remote learning center, which allowed the kids to come here when schools were closed for the entire day. This center provided both family and student with much needed social and emotional support.
My name is Tracy Pittman, the executive director here at the SPOT. When the schools decided to reopen, the SPOT was able to provide an after-school program in collaboration with Wilson County Schools to provide a 21st century program for kids grades 3rd through 5th grade. Also providing activity-based learning and social emotional learning as well to help support the students and their families.
We'll move on to housing. Dr. White?
Okay, so we have 2 persons that are supporting us today under housing. Mr. Tim Rogers, who is from the Wilson Housing Authority, and I believe Ms. Neal is going to address questions to Mr. Rogers. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Rogers, we know that Housing is also a significant concern among our community members, and that is why you're here today. So what are the housing needs in Wilson? Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's put this together and for inviting the Wilson Housing Authority to be part of this presentation. There is a large demand in Wilson for affordable housing and a definite need to expand affordable housing opportunities throughout the community. There are a number of factors that fuel this demand, but among the largest factors are a poverty rate that remains at or above 20% in Wilson County, which is well above the state poverty rate of 13.6% and the national poverty rate of 10.5%. There's also an overall lack of housing in the community that can be considered as both safe and affordable due to an aging existing housing stock that in many neighborhoods is deteriorating and few new developments that focus on keeping rents affordable to low-income residents. I'll give you an example from our own waiting lists, which because of the demand are currently closed. We cannot accept any new applications at the time because of the number of people that we have on our waiting list. The waiting list for both our public housing and housing voucher programs, which serve low-income Wilson residents. We have more than 300 families and residents on the waiting list for each of our 3 public housing communities. Some of them have been on this waiting list for at least 2 years, but they choose to stay on the list because they've not been able to find suitable housing that they can truly afford. We've just finished opening up our waiting list for people to put in a pre-application for our voucher program, which is where you receive a voucher, and that is you can go out and rent an apartment, and then depending on your income and different factors, a subsidy is paid to you to help you support that rent and utilities. It was 3 weeks, more than 1,300 families sent in pre-applications. From that number, we randomly chose 250 families to start the process of filling out our larger application. We've had to close the waiting list because these 250, it will likely take us 2 years to get through all of those families based on our historic trends. But you can do the math there. That's more than 1,000 families and individuals who we weren't able to bring into the program. So overhanging these 2 big concerns, of course, is the presence of the pandemic, which has disproportionately affected lower income residents, many of whom were able to remain in housing only because of the eviction moratorium for those who've not been able to pay their rent, and racial inequalities in income. I looked at census figures from 2019, when the median household income for white families here was $60,000, while the median household income for Black families was $31,000, and for Hispanic families, $30,000. This income disparity means that the demand for affordable housing and the relative lack of affordable units disproportionately affects communities of color more than white residents. As these figures demonstrate, Wilson has a definite need for new affordable housing. At the Housing Authority, if you've been near the Whole Truth Restaurant in our Whitfield Homes community, you can see that we are currently in the first phase of building 54 new affordable housing units. These units, however, are replacing older units that were located in flood zones and due to repeated flooding events had become unsafe and uninhabitable. I wish I could tell you they were 32 new ones, but we are replacing older stock with newer units. We'll be ready to house residents in the first 32 of these units next year. If you're familiar with our Tasman Towers building, which is across the street from the public library, that had 58 units for elderly low-income residents. Because of significant water issues, we have relocated everyone from the towers. That happened in 2020, and will likely be 2 years before we're able to move people back in, but we will totally renovate those units and have them available in a new and better shape. I also have to point out a significant factor affecting all new construction and renovations, the rapid increase in construction costs that the entire economy is experiencing. If you saw a recent Wilson Times article, the city said it was having to increase the price of the affordable homes that is building in Freeman Place by 15%. And that was simply due to the rising cost of construction. The homes are still being built. The city still has buyers, but the increased prices may leave some families behind who have not seen a similar rise in their incomes and may be priced out of affording one of these homes. The significant cost increases also affect plans to renovate older homes and drive up rental prices, which of course impacts families at the bottom tier of household income. One good thing that is, well, there are many good things, but the city of Wilson is starting the process of looking at a number of issues surrounding housing in Wilson. We are hopeful that when the census numbers come out in August, it will be over 50,000 people, because that will help drive a whole new range of grants and money that could be available to the city. This study looks like it will last about a year. The Housing Authority is just one of partners working with the city on it.
Well, Mr. Rogers, you've been very thorough. Let me just ask, are there, what availabilities are there for disabled veterans through the Housing Authority?
For disabled veterans?
Yes.
So we do have a preference for veterans, but again, I would say currently our waiting lists are closed, so we are not taking anyone new into our programs, because we have to serve the people who are already on that waiting list first. But if we obviously do not discriminate based on disabilities, we make accommodations in public housing for any disability. If you are a veteran, you do get a preference, so you can go up higher on the waiting list to help house them. And I'll touch on this later, but we do work with Veterans Residential Services as well. If we don't have room for a veteran and they call us, we've been able to help them place several of their clients in other affordable housing units throughout the city.
Thank you very much. I do see a few more questions that we would like to ask you when we have time. But before we do that, I'm going to ask Dr. White if she would ask her questions to Mr. Dixon, and then we'll come back to the questions that haven't been responded to.
Good evening, Mr. Dixon. He is the manager of the Self-Help Credit Union here in Wilson, North Carolina. He is an active part of our community. And the question I have for you today from the community is, what are some of the misconceptions people have about home ownership?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I relish the opportunity anytime I get a chance like this. The Self-Help Credit Union, just to give you a little small snippet of who we are. We're basically a normal financial institution. The only difference is we have a very different mission. Our mission is to help to create economic opportunity and ownership for all, but especially people of color, women, and people in rural areas and in low wealth communities. We feel like that is very important because of systems put in place in the past. They have kind of disproportionately affected these people that we're talking about. So what we try to do, we try to make the playing field a little bit more equitable through underwriting. So we're basically practicing a way to help people to become homeowners and to gain wealth that would affect generations. So one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about home ownership, they're very slim in their ideology of who they feel like they can go to get a home. For an example, being that we are a community development financial institution, it is our job to help individuals in low wealth communities. So what we've tried to do, and we're constantly changing and we're filling with our product, we're trying to make our product, be very useful. What people think, they think they have to have a certain credit score. They think they have to have a certain income. Now, don't get me wrong, all of those things are still relevant with us. However, we have come up with a plan or a program where what we can do, we can help people with credit scores as low as 580. Now, there are other things that we look at, because getting in the home is one thing, but being able to maintain the home is another. So what we try to do responsible lending by looking at things. Just to give you an example, some people have had credit issues in the past due to divorce, due to student loans. It's a number of issues. It's not always someone just not wanting to pay. Life happens. Not only life happens, but the income sometimes that we are making is capped due to our education, job opportunities, and things of that nature. So we feel like one of the best ways to help create home ownership within these communities, if people are paying rents and you can get their mortgage to be the same price as their rent, if they can afford to pay rent and they can handle rent, that means if you transition them in a home, they'll be able to afford the home. So in doing so, we look at a lot of things in our underwriting that a lot of lenders would not do because it's too high risk. But this is what we're here for. We're here to take those risks. We have down payment assistance programs. And the one thing that we do as a credit union, being that we find all these issues that they continue to evolve due to whatever the climate is, as far as what our nation goes through or what our community goes through, we have to kind of evolve with our underwriting. But one thing that we've done here, and a lot of people probably don't even know this, but this credit union, we have credit unions here in North Carolina, California, Chicago, Milwaukee, Florida. We just obtained some in Washington State, and we are one of 2 credit unions in our whole division that has a financial coach. So here's the advantage of the financial coach. A person can come in, they can say, hey, look, this is my goal. We can give them free financial coaching. They will help them with doing a spending plan. They'll help them with, because see, one thing is to get in the home, but the other thing is to maintain the home and stay into the home. So we focus more on financial capability versus financial literacy. And if just to give you a difference in what the two mean, literacy is the education and giving people the skills. But what capability is doing that, but giving them access to financial services. It's no good to have skills if you have no one there to help you out. Our underwriting process that I talked about, and I'm gonna stop a little bit, but we're very passionate about the work we do. You have to be to work here. But one thing about what we do is we don't go through an automated underwriting process where we put it in the computer and the algorithm say that a person is approved or not approved. You may come here, and if you're going through some struggles that a traditional lending institution wouldn't help you out, it may take us 2 days to come up with a decision because we want to do responsible lending. We want to give you a loan that's going to work for you at the terms you can have, and we're looking at what caused your credit score to be what it is. And then, if we find out that it would be irresponsible to assist you in the manner that you would like at that moment, we can offer you the financial coaching. The financial coach will basically help you meet the underwriting. And by the time you finish with the financial coach, there are levels. You'll be able to, get what you need from us. Or say, for instance, say, hey, look, I want to do a little bit better, get a better interest rate. Maybe go, we want you to be banked, and we want you to be able to have the home because, a lot of times we don't understand how homes create wealth in our community. It's not just a place to stay. It's how a lot of people start their businesses. It's off the equity in their home. So these are some of the things that we're doing. I'm sorry I'm rambling on, but I'm going to stop right there and wait for another question.
Okay, so I think you've answered a little bit of the second question that they had, and that was some of the main issues you encounter when trying to get someone pre-qualified for a home. But you talked a little bit about that, but would you like to take maybe another minute or two if there's anything that you would like to add?
I will say this, being that we are a financial institution and we're a credit union, of course, all credit unions are nonprofits. Sometimes people come with the ideal of that we are here to just give them what they want. And that's not the case. The case is we're here to get you in a position to be able to sustain a financial lifestyle pretty much where you'll be able to exist in society. And we're just the ones to help you, get those things. So that's one of the things that we do encounter. Sometimes people come and sometimes we'll work with someone on the second or the third try because the first time they come, they're a little bit disappointed because this is what they thought they were going to get. But once they come and they understand the program and I'm like, it's free of charge. It's nothing we're charging for. And they get into the program, what they understand is, hey, home ownership may be my number one goal, but guess what? I'm getting things straight. I'm getting my car refinanced. Or if I'm not getting my car refinanced, I have I won't call out any names, but I have a loan with a predatory lender because you see a lot of that. And we can get, we can drop your payment. there's a lot of steps to home ownership, to making people homeowners that can maintain those homes, because those are the key. So that's what, sometimes the issues that we go through is just a person truly understanding the process that we can take them through and how we can assist them.
And thank you so much. We appreciate that, Mr. Dixon, because we do know that wealth is built in communities where people own homes. So we thank you for the work that you're doing, and the fact that it is true that many times people come where life has hit them from the blind side, and maybe their credit is not what they wanted it to be, or maybe their income is not what they thought it should be or it could be. And then they think they can't own a home. But the program that you have, we appreciate you are taking the time to explain. And hopefully someone on this forum today will be able to share that information to someone who wants to own a home, but felt like maybe they couldn't, but going through the program there, it's very possible that they can. So what we're going to do now is we're going to transition to Shonda, and we're going to find out if there are any questions in the chat that have not been answered. Shonda has been working behind the scenes, helping us out. And what she's been doing is looking at your questions. If the question is answered, she sort of puts a check mark beside it so she doesn't ask it again. So at this point, I'd like to find out, Shonda, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Great. Are there any questions in the chat that have not been answered?
Yes, we have quite a few questions. So I can start off with Dr. Wilson with a question for the school system. The first question is, what are the top 3 reasons for the suspensions in Wilson County?
I would have to look that information up and get that information back to Dr. White.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Sherry Lucas. She says, how have the schools met the IEPs for the students during virtual learning?
Our team, our Exceptional Children's Department, met with each of the families early on and developed a contingency plan with our families. That was early on when COVID began to happen for this current school year. When those students and their families chose to make sure that they wanted to stay virtually, then Ms. McFadder, our executive director of Exceptional Children, worked with the teachers who were interested in doing the virtual academy. Those would be the ones that, when the students are back in school, those IEPs are easier to meet. But when they are meeting virtually, it's a little bit more challenging. And we just transitioned to the virtual online platform and had the meetings that way to make sure that we fulfill those IEPs. If for some reason that there are some that would not have, then we certainly would be offering compensatory education for those families.
Okay, thank you. Next question was from Dr. Foster. He said, will you offer summer school for Wilson County students?
Absolutely. We are in the midst of planning our summer learning, and it's called our Summer Scholars Institute. There's a link on our Wilson County Schools webpage about the Summer Scholars Institute. We have been in the process of recruiting our staff, and there will be some information going out to our families tomorrow evening about students registering.
Okay, and one last question. How will you determine which students need support?
We have a process in place working with our principals to where there are letters that have gone out to the families, sharing with the families if their students are considered at risk. That provides the families some information outside of the report card. And then throughout the school year, if there are students stay at risk, then there are teams that work with those students during the school day, but also as part of this summer learning, they will be invited to attend.
Okay, thank you. Next for Mr. Morris. What can we do, from Dr. Foster, what can we do as residents to change our status of a food desert?
Yeah, one thing I would suggest is trying to have, I guess, the community come together and form like a food security plan, regional food security plan. Our food bank is in the middle of strategic planning right now. And one thing that has come up that we want to help out with is being a part of those regional food security plans. So meeting with local partner agencies, governmental entities, and representatives, individuals who are food insecure, the citizens, other nonprofit organizations, to figure out together what we can do as a community to figure out how to make Wilson not be a food desert. There's some ideas that have happened in other communities, like establishing food cooperatives. That's something that takes a lot of time. So it's not something that's going to happen really quickly, and it involves a lot of dedication from the citizens to get something like that off the ground. And in Raleigh, they've been trying to start a fertile ground food co-op for several years now. They have a nonprofit, I think, established, and I think they've been working on this since at least maybe 2011, 12 or so, and they still don't have the food co-op built. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of investment to get something like that going. Our food bank, we do deliveries, as I mentioned earlier, but we talked about maybe doing some more formal, like mobile markets, where we bring a lot of fresh produce out and set it up kind of like market style for folks in areas where it is needed. And we can partner with organizations, not putting anybody on the spot or anything, but maybe local housing authorities. We have partnered throughout our service area with housing authorities before, and brought out food to those individual units. Something that is a possibility. There's several folks, I think, on this Zoom call today that it'd be nice to follow up with to see what we may be able to do to decrease food insecurity in Wilson. Attracting farmers markets. I'm not sure how many farmers markets there are currently in Wilson, but that is another way to get really good, nutritious food out to individuals, and just generating that interest in a farmers market. And even thinking about minority-owned farms, Black farmers, partnering with them to get their food out into communities. Promoting community gardening as well, and then teaching people, if they're interested, how to garden for themselves. I'm an avid gardener personally, and it's something that I'm passionate about. And the food bank's passionate about doing it as well. But people growing their own food is very powerful. And if you could grow your own food, you can do anything pretty much. And you can grow your own nutritious food without having to worry about pesticides, et cetera. And it's something that, if you're able to go out and pick your own tomato out of your garden, then you have a meal or part of a meal for that evening. So many different strategies we can use to try to eliminate Wilson as a food desert. But it's going to take a lot of time and investment.
Mr. Atkinson, I'm monitoring the clock for us as well. Do you have one or two questions for Mr. Rogers? We'll give him an opportunity to maybe answer one or two questions, and then we'll do the commentary from Dr. Foster and Mayor Stevens.
Okay, for Mr. Rogers, a question: Can an ex-convict find government housing?
The answer is yes. It depends on what the crime that was committed, the recency of it. So there's no one size fits all. HUD is, and of course the rules that we use to govern our public housing program and voucher, the same as they're used across the country. They're mostly mandated by HUD. There is some local variance, but those rules are loosening as people understand the need to help people who are coming out of jail or have records that need to be redacted to help them get housing. There are some automatic disqualifiers. If you're on a sex offender registry, you cannot get federally subsidized housing. And if you've ever been convicted of manufacturing meth, you can't. And the reason for that, obviously, is that's a danger to the community as you're as liable to blow your own house up as your neighbor's house. So mostly they're not, it just depends on the severity. But yeah, we work with everyone on a one-on-one basis. And I would say that, you know, don't hesitate to apply because you never know what's going to happen. You should not apply because you think you won't be taken.
Okay, and one last question. Where do people live during Reconstruction?
I'm sorry?
Where do people live during Reconstruction?
Oh, you mean like, for instance, Tasman Towers?
Yes.
Okay. So the people who lived in Tasman Towers in 2020, we moved them. We paid for those moves. Some of them went to public housing units. Some of them were given vouchers, and we did not start any work. It was about a 3.5-month process to relocate everyone to a suitable housing arrangement for them. So we've done the same thing when Matthew flooded out units. We relocated people. We pay for the move. We help them. We'll help them temporarily if they have to be in a hotel. But obviously that's not the ideal. We want to get them into another unit or get them a voucher and get them into a house or apartment as quickly as we can. And so we pay for that and we assist them with all of those moves. We hire the movers, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Could I, there's one in the chat I just wanted to respond to real quickly, if I could.
Sure.
It says, why is there a shortage of public housing? That's from Dr. Foster. I don't mean to make it seem like there's a short, we actually have over 1,400 total units spread between public housing and our voucher program. But the demand is so much greater than even those number of units. And we would love to have more. Of course, it costs a lot to build new units, but we are trying. We have applied for grants to build new units, not just to replace those that, you know, we've had to repair or tear down because of flooding events. So we would like to expand the housing stock that we have, but that is also subject to federal funding. And I think one of the good things that we may see in the housing area is obviously there seems to be a commitment by the Biden administration to put a lot more money into housing as part of these programs that he's been proposing over the first 100 days.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. And thank you also, Ms. Shonda Atkinson. Excellent job. We appreciate your help. At this time, we will transition to hear closing comments, first from Mayor Carlton Stevens, and then from Dr. Lamont Foster, who is the provides oversight and director of this project. Mayor Stevens.
Very good. I just want to quickly say thank you to everyone that was on the call tonight. I learned a lot. You know, I learned a lot. I think one of the major takeaways was what Adrian was talking about with the self-help credit union. I don't think a lot of people know what you really do, man. I didn't know what you did. And, you know, I know whenever I purchased my house, I had to have 1,000 credit score almost, it seemed like. But, you know, to give that kind of information out, brother, I really think you need to try to find a way, or maybe this call will help get you out, because home ownership is something that I really push for. It is so important, because when you have a buy-in in something, it just means more to you. And, you know, I would love to see your bank get out there even more. So I just want to say to you, man, thank you so much. And to all the panelists that chimed in, Dr. Wilson, you know, you're awesome. You're #1 in my book anyway. Mr. Morris, you said that you didn't live in Wilson, so we still gonna let you talk a little bit, but you did a really good job. And of course, Tim, man, you know, you and I, we go back, and I appreciate what you're doing. And to Paula for bringing the Wilson Forward group in. I support you, and I hope other people on the call will find a way to chime in, because I think you're phenomenal. And of course, Matt, Matt, what you guys did during the summertime, feeding our children, it was phenomenal, man. I just, I'm great. I'm so grateful to be here in Wilson, because we have some awesome people. And I just want to say thank you again to everyone, and I can't wait for the next one.
Thank you. Dr. Foster?
I concur with Mayor Stevens. This is how we demystify misinformation, by providing facts. And I want to thank the panelists for coming. I want to thank Dr. White and Ms. Neal for putting this together. I want you all to share that there will be other forums. Spread the word that you can go to YouTube and be able to pull this session up and get accurate information out to the public. The questions that I ask is that at the end, when we finish with the forums, I will have a strategic plan on systemic change, but it will be based on accurate information. And so I thank each of you for sharing with us and providing us with facts of what the agency and what entity you represent and what you're doing. And so God bless you, and may heaven continue to smile upon you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you to everyone for joining us. This concludes our forum. Have a great evening.